Hey everybody, welcome to the Briefing Room. I'm Devin Dwyer in Washington. Great to have you with us on this Thursday. Some breaking news to start the show today on the effort by President Trump and his allies to investigate former Vice President Joe Biden in Ukraine. The Justice Department today arrested and indicted two associates of Trump's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, for allegedly funneling more than $300,000 of foreign money to a group supporting President Trump's re-election. The two men, you see them there, Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman. They're both American citizens. They're both businessmen from Florida. They were arrested at Dulles Airport last night as they tried to leave the country on one-way tickets. Today they appeared in court, and prosecutors explained the charges.
As alleged in the indictment, the defendants broke the law to gain political influence while avoiding disclosure of who was actually making the donations and where the money was coming from.
The American people expect and deserve an election process that has not been corrupted by the influence of foreign interests, and the public has a right to know the true source of campaign contributions. Laws make up the fabric of who we are as a nation. These allegations are not about some technicality, a civil violation, or an error on a form. This investigation is about corrupt behavior, deliberate law-breaking.
All right, and Mike Levine is our senior investigative reporter. He joins us now, has been leading on this story. Mike, these are the first criminal charges related to this Ukraine controversy. They don't directly implicate President Trump in any wrongdoing, but it does hit very close to home for him.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are going to care about this because it's another small piece to the bigger puzzle of what led to that July 25th phone call with the Ukrainian president that now, of course, is at the center of an impeachment inquiry. What we learned today in the charging documents is that in the middle of last year, Lev Parnas, who you said was arrested, he asked a congressman to help with an effort to get the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine fired. In the months after that, he and Rudy Giuliani were part of a group that tried to dig into dirt, as we know, on Joe Biden and some others. And then that sort of continued until March 26th. Lev Parnas was on an email, we've learned. He was among many others on an email that was talking about how to deal with getting this information out more and into the public.
And these two guys, we should say again, were also in the charges today deal with campaign finance law violations, allegations, but they're accused of funneling hundreds of thousands of dollars to this, not only that congressman you mentioned, but also to this group supporting President Trump. We should say that the President Trump's counsel, Jay Sekulow, gave us a statement about the president's awareness of all this. Let's put that up. Sekulow says, as the indictment makes clear, neither the president nor the campaign were aware of these allegations. But, Mike, again, to underscore, this is Rudy Giuliani, who talks to the president all the time. In fact, there's some reporting out there that he was seen just this week over at Trump Hotel across town with the two suspects in this indictment. Is there any implication here for the impeachment process?
Well, I think, again, Democrats are going to look at what we now know from these charging documents, that in the middle of last year is when Lev Parnas was asking for help in getting this ambassador fired. And the reason that matters is because the ambassador, her firing and allegations around her was one of two things that Trump talked about on that July 25th phone call, which, again, is the key, the whole center of this impeachment inquiry.
So two American citizens over in Ukraine involved in some money funneling, allegedly, and also tied up in this effort that the president has been pushing. Maybe he didn't know about it, but certainly interesting. A lot of questions there. Mike Levine, thanks for that. Jordan Phelps is at the White House for us as all this is breaking. It certainly doesn't look good, Jordan. But what are White House officials saying about these two indictments?
Devin, the White House is staying silent on this. We obviously saw that statement you pointed to from the president's personal attorney, Jay Sekulow, but the White House is staying out of this for now. But President Trump is set to depart the White House for a campaign rally tonight in just about half an hour. And I'm told we do expect to hear from the president then, and I'm sure he'll be asked about this, Devin.
All right, Jordan, thanks. Meantime, the president of Ukraine is speaking out today as well. He sat down with ABC's Tom Yamas to talk about the President Trump's efforts to get him to investigate Joe Biden. And he insisted today in an interview in Kiev that there was no blackmail involved. Take a listen.
Devin, good evening to you. It's almost nighttime here in Kiev. And today, the president of Ukraine involved in what he called a media marathon, 10 hours of nonstop questions with reporters. We were invited to sit down with him around a dinner table with about 10 other journalists to ask questions, basically fire off questions and get his answers. Now, he did answer us in English, though most of the time we sat at the table, the conversations were obviously in Ukrainian. Now, we asked him specifically if he thought it was corrupt for a president to ask a foreign nation to investigate a political rival, essentially what President Trump asked him to do, and if that was corrupt. President Zelensky in part had campaigned on anti-corruption. Here's what he had to say. What do you think of a president asking a foreign nation to investigate a political rival? Is that corrupt?
I think that this is not corruption because it was just called, and he said, you know, we are tired from any corruption things, and there is, for example, this one case about Burisma. Yes, he told, I don't remember all the words because it was too long.
Now, Zelensky says he has not broken any laws, that it was not corrupt what he did, it was just a phone call. But when I pressed him if what President Trump had done was corrupt, as many have claimed in the United States, including Democrats and others, he says he's not going to judge President Trump, that he's unaware that the president has broken any laws, and that in his opinion, it was just a phone call. Devin?
All right, thanks to Tom Yamas over there in Kiev. Let's bring Jordan Phelps back into the conversation from the White House. Jordan, the president has been seizing on this interview that Tom did with the Ukrainian president. He says it's vindication. There was no blackmail. There was no pressure on that call. But it doesn't change the fact that President Trump did ask a foreign leader to investigate his rival, and White House officials were very concerned about it.
Yeah, Devin, the president says this should put an end to it. But of course, Devin, this is sort of irrelevant to the House inquiry here. They're not trying to establish that there was a quid pro quo as the Ukrainian president might have understood it. What they're trying to establish is, did the president abuse his authority as the president of the United States and as the commander in chief, and use that power as the top elected official in this country to try to benefit his own political campaign and put our own national security at risk because of Ukraine's vulnerabilities vis-a-vis Russia, Devin?
Hey, thanks, Jordan Phelps, for us at the White House. As Jordan said, the president headed off to Minnesota tonight for a campaign rally. Impeachment likely to be front and center in his stump speech on stage. This is a new poll just out today from Marist in the Wall Street Journal, shows new support among the American people for the impeachment inquiry. Here's the number: 52% now, a majority support the inquiry into alleged wrongdoing by President Trump. That includes a majority of independent voters as well. Rachel Scott is out in Minneapolis covering the president's activities out there. Rachel, you've been talking with the president's supporters about the inquiry, about the controversy. What are you hearing from them?
Yeah, exactly that, Devin. Take a look. The president's supporters are heading in right now. I have learned what a skyway is. I'm a California girl. We're inside because it's raining outside. And I have the transcript along with me here as I talk to the president's supporters, since so much of what we're asking them about is what is in this 5-page White House summary. And now, they don't deny the facts. They do not deny that what is in here, that the president repeatedly urged the leader of Ukraine to investigate a potential 2020 rival. But for them, they think it's a hoax. They think this impeachment investigation is a witch hunt. Take a listen to what they had to say.
I think it's a hoax. I don't believe in it.
What did you make of the president's phone call with the leader of Ukraine? That obviously triggered the impeachment inquiry. He repeatedly urged the leader of Ukraine to investigate a potential 2020 rival. Is that wrong?
Is it wrong that he was talking to him?
Is it wrong that he asked him to investigate corruption and Joe Biden?
I don't see that he did anything wrong.
I think it's all a hoax. It's all a bunch of crap.
So flat out, no wrongdoing. That is the consensus here from the president's supporters. They do not think that the president was wrong in asking. For them, they say it was a simple phone call. There was no pressure there. They believe that if there is corruption, that there's no problem with the president asking a foreign leader to do so. Even the personal attorney, the president's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, to investigate that rather than the Justice Department. And when it comes to the idea of impeachment, they repeat a lot of the same talking points that the Trump campaign is running with, that this is the Democrats' effort to overturn the 2016 election. I have heard that over and over again from the supporters here. They say witch hunt, that two-letter phrase that was so significant to the Mueller investigation, hearing it back out here again when it comes to impeachment. And they say they don't believe the House can fairly investigate the president. If it's Democrats who are leading it, they just think that this whole thing needs to end, and it's just simply a way to overturn the 2016 election, Devin.
Those talking points have taken hold, at least with the Trump base. Rachel Scott, thank you so much for that. We'll see how this continues to play with independent voters who will be so crucial coming up. Moving now overseas, though, to the crisis in Syria on the border with Turkey. We told you this week on the front lines of ISIS that President Trump abruptly pulled U.S. forces out of that area. Turkey is now in its second day of an all-out assault on the Kurdish forces that used to be our allies in that same area in the fight against ISIS. The fighting, of course, drawing intense protests from Republicans and Democrats. Harsh criticism for the president for abandoning them, the Kurds, and putting lives at risk. Our Ian Panel is over there in the region and filed this report for the briefing room a short time ago.
Hi, Devin. We are now in northern Syria. I can tell you, the last time we were here, we were seeing U.S. and Kurdish fighters working hand in hand to defeat ISIS. But today, that, of course, has all changed. We're seeing Turkish troops move across the border as part of an invasion. And that partnership with U.S. forces, together with the battle against ISIS, has just been thrown into disarray. Overnight, Turkish forces attacking Syria from the sky and the ground. Machine gun fire can be heard filling the air as we enter day 2 of the assault from Turkey. Turkey claiming to have struck more than 180 targets, launching an all-out assault against America's Kurdish allies who've been on the front lines in the fight against ISIS. A ground attack now also underway this morning. The large-scale operation coming just days after President Trump's announcement to pull U.S. troops back from the border, seemingly giving Turkey a green light. But Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is pushing back on that assertion as the administration again appears to send mixed messages.
Yeah, well, that's just false. The United States didn't give Turkey a green light.
One U.S. official now tells ABC News that some Kurdish guards have left their posts at prisons holding ISIS fighters, raising fears that the Turkish incursion could result in ISIS detainees escaping, putting U.S. national security at risk. President Trump distancing himself from the Turkish incursion, calling the operation a bad idea. But when pressed about the potential danger posed by the prisoners if they escape, President Trump seemingly unconcerned.
Well, they're going to be escaping to Europe. That's where they want to go. They want to go back to their homes.
Turkey's President Erdogan labels the Kurds terrorists and claims the operation will prevent a terror corridor and bring peace.
Smoke rising from artillery shells.
But on the ground, it's not terrorists, but civilians fleeing. Mothers with small babies packing up everything they can, cramming into the back of pickup trucks. But there are few safe places to run to now. The Kurds reporting multiple civilian casualties and at least 5 deaths.
All right, let's go.
We've been on the front lines with the Kurds, watching their troops fight alongside U.S. soldiers for years and keeping ISIS at bay. Just this morning, 2 British ISIS members known as the Beatles held by the Kurds, but now taken into U.S. custody. President Trump threatening retaliation against Turkey if the Kurds are completely wiped out.
I will wipe out his economy if that happens.
So we've heard some strong words from the president, but I can tell you, Devin, no one here is listening. Not the Turkish army that's driving its forces across the border, and certainly not the Kurds, who are more concerned about staying alive and protecting their homes and, of course, their families. I can tell you, we were talking earlier to a Kurdish intelligence official, and he kept asking, why has America betrayed its friend? Saying that no one in the Middle East would now believe America's word. Devin?
All right, thanks to you, Ian Panel, for terrific reporting over there inside Syria. Much more ahead tonight on World News Tonight. Back here at home now, and the Trump administration's continuing crackdown on legal and illegal immigration in this country. You've heard the president's vows to up those ICE raids in this country. Well, today, the head of the agency that conducts those raids gave an update on how many immigrants have been removed in the past year. The total is 260,000. Let's bring in Quinn Owen now. He's our immigration reporter and has been, of course, tracking these numbers, been down on the border. Quinn, it's great to see you. Help us put this total, 260,000, into some context. It's a lot of people that have been rounded up and deported, but how does that compare?
A lot of people removed. That estimate is actually a slight uptick from the previous year, but overall, the number of people removed is still lower than the peak levels we saw under President Obama. Now, as we reported on this show before, the humanitarian crisis at the southern border is a major factor in that, and the head of ICE, Acting Director Matthew Albence, spoke about that today at the White House briefing room. I think we have a clip.
We've had to redeploy our ICE resources to support the Border Patrol and Customs and Border Protection with those challenges at the border, which has made us less safe.
So he's saying they have had less capacity to do this because of the situation at the border. The numbers are striking. Let's put them up. They've also been a flashpoint for Democrats on the campaign trail. Of course, people like Joe Biden having to answer for why back in 2011, 2012. Look at that. More than 400,000 ICE removals just in that year alone when President Obama won re-election. Is this just simply the border, or is there more at work here?
There's another element of this, and Albence spoke about it at the press conference today. The cooperation between federal law enforcement, the ICE agents that are doing these removals, and the state and local jurisdictions is another huge thing that they're dealing with. The Obama administration was able to forge those partnerships. ICE has struggled to do that. And we've also heard from Homeland Security career officials who are saying that the rhetoric coming out of the White House isn't making it any easier for local police officers to cooperate and get criminals removed.
Interesting. So state and local governments stopping their cooperation has been at least part of why these numbers have gone down. Meantime, Quinn, the administration is rolling out a plan that it announced a couple weeks ago about how they're going to try to crack down on legal immigration in this country. They're making it harder for legal immigrants applying for green cards to get status if they need health insurance.
That's right. They are rolling out what's called a public charge rule, which raises the bar, raises the standards for poor immigrants who are trying to legally make it into the country. They're now going to have to fill out these new forms that were just released overnight that detail debt, assets, education level. Some of that was already part of the immigration process, but now it'll be much harder for low-income immigrants coming from poor Central American countries to go through the legal process.
Let's dig into that a little bit with Jackie Vimo. She joins us now here in the D.C. Bureau from the National Immigration Law Center. Jackie, it's great to see you. So how common is it for immigrants applying for legal status in this country to sort of come to the door with no health insurance? How many people are we talking about here?
Well, I think that it's important to know that this is a radical change in our immigration laws, and that this is something that President Trump was trying to do by passing his so-called merit-based immigration bill. He failed to get that through Congress. And so what he's doing is using rulemaking and proclamations to do a run around Congress to build what is really an invisible wall. This is another brick in what is really a messaging to folks that are trying to come into the country that if you're not white and you're not wealthy, you're not welcome. And this is a real departure from status quo. Before it was very almost unheard of for people to be denied entrance into the United States for these factors. There was the idea that you could come here.
Jackie, what types of people are these? Like, what types of countries are they from? Give us a sense of who is going to be most impacted by this rule.
Exactly. Well, so there's a number of different things happening. There's the public charge rule, and then there's a new proclamation that was issued on Friday night. But all of these factors, the Migration Policy Institute estimates that these initiatives could reduce the flows of legal immigration by 2/3. I mean, that is slashing legal immigration. And the majority of the people that this is going to impact are going to be folks from low-income countries and people of color, because the reality is that people from Norway, people from Sweden, people from the UK who are making $100,000 or more or less are going to not be impacted by this. So this is really an attack on race and on wealth.
And real quickly, just before we let you go, Jackie, how do you answer the Trump administration's argument that we hear all the time that these people from less wealthy countries that come in are much more likely to be a burden? In fact, the White House statement says they will saddle our health care system. Is that true? What's the answer to their argument on that point?
Well, first of all, this is not about health care. The Trump administration has been attacking our health care system through the Affordable Care Act, eroding the individual mandate, attacking the Child Health Insurance Program. This is actually going to make folks more uninsured. But the reality is that all the data shows that, when we move forward into the next generations, that actually immigrants use benefits at levels much less than U.S. citizens, and actually are a net boon to the economy. So it's a nonsense argument that's just going to result in more people being uninsured, and another attack on our healthcare system at a time when, after 10 years of making progress on decreasing the number of uninsured, this is the first year that we've seen a spike in uninsured populations. These attacks on immigrants and our healthcare system are just going to continue that trend and really hurt all of us.
It's certainly part of a much broader crackdown that this administration has been pushing. It's heating up as we head into the campaign, and we certainly know what's at play there. Jackie Vimo with the National Immigration Law Center. Thanks so much for coming in, Jackie. Great to have your perspective, and thanks to you, Quinn Owen, for your terrific reporting on that front as well. Moving on now to a new move by the Trump administration's Environmental Protection Agency that might surprise you. The Environmental Agency today announced a new regulation, yes, adding a regulation aimed at reducing exposure to lead in drinking water in this country. The Flint, Michigan crisis, of course, 5 years ago put the spotlight on this, but take a look at this map and the cities in this country, the communities in this country, thousands of them that are actually being impacted right now by elevated levels of lead in their drinking water. Stephanie Ebbs is our environmental reporter. She's been all over this story from the start. Stephanie, break it down for us real quickly here, what the EPA is doing today. What steps are they taking?
Yeah, so this is the biggest effort to eliminate exposure to lead in decades. EPA Chief Andrew Wheeler compared it to banning lead in gasoline and banning lead paint. So basically what they say they're doing is they are rolling out this proposal to target lead service lines, which is what's literally bringing the water into your house, that are most likely to expose you to lead. So there's multiple things in this process that require actually identifying where those estimated 10 million lead service lines are in the country, because we actually don't know right now. Different ways of treating that water, different ways of testing that water, requirements to notify people if that water has a specific amount.
So just to be clear, this is the Trump EPA putting in new rules, new regulations.
It is. I mean, it's the lead and copper rule, which is a major EPA regulation. It's been under review for years and years, and they say that since the Flint crisis, they really buckled down and needed to get this out.
Eric Olson is with us as well. He's from the National Resources Defense Council, tracking these water issues for communities and families. Eric, great to see you. So is this a positive step in your view?
Well, there are a few things in here that are good. The problem is that it's sort of putting a happy face on some really serious problems with the rule. For example, they're extending the current requirement to pull out those lead pipes out of the ground. Currently, they're supposed to be pulled out within 13 years if they're high levels of lead, and they're stretching that out to 33 years. So although there's some tweaks that might have some small benefit, we're very concerned about basically more than doubling the amount of time that is allowed for the water systems to take out those lead pipes. So that is a worry that we have.
Right, and EPA has actually responded to that concern by saying there were loopholes in the 7% requirement, and the 3% is full pipe replacement, no exceptions.
Fascinating as this is being rolled out. Eric, real quickly before we let you go, what can people concerned about lead in their water do? This is obviously something we can't taste or see, but give us some news we can use in terms of how we can all protect ourselves.
Well, there are millions of people, more than 5.5 million people served by these systems that have problems, and probably more than that. So you can get your water tested. You can contact a certified laboratory and get your water tested for lead. And you can also consider using a filter that is independently certified to remove lead. But you have to install that right, and you have to maintain it and change it correctly, or else you can continue having problems.
All right, great to have you with us, Eric Olson. Sorry we couldn't talk longer. Thank you so much for coming in from the National Resources Defense Council. Stephanie Ebbs, thank you as always. Some interesting news coming out of the EPA today. Finally, a historic milestone we want to take note of today. The city of Montgomery, Alabama, the state capital in that state, with its dual history of slavery and Jim Crow, also being the birthplace of the civil rights movement, this week elected the first African-American mayor in that city's 200-year history. And Stephen Reed joins me now via Skype from Montgomery. Mayor Reed, it is great to see you. Congratulations on your victory. Has the victory sung in, and what do you make of the history of this moment for your city?
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you today as the mayor-elect of Montgomery, Alabama. It has not sunk in just yet. It's been a whirlwind since late Tuesday night when we were declared the winner, and we've been going fast forward pretty much since then. But I think the historical significance of this is not lost on me, nor my campaign. We started to understand as we were knocking on doors and as we were talking to people in churches, at community centers, and just out in the streets here about what this election was really, and why the election was important to them and what we wanted to do to maintain all of the opportunities here and the type of narrative we wanted to create for the city of Montgomery. So being born and raised in Montgomery, I understand it. I got a better lesson in it throughout the course of this campaign, and I realized, what it means to so many people across this country.
I was stunned to learn that Montgomery was one of just 3 major cities in the Deep South that has not had an African-American mayor in its history. Obviously, you can cross Montgomery off the list now, but what took so long?
I think it's a number of events. I think really there's been some systemic things that have been in place which have not helped our voting efforts here. I think that we've been very archaic in our approach to voting. We don't have early voting. We don't make it accessible as much as we should relative to other communities. I also think that in the past we've tried to navigate the thin line of racial politics in the sense of whether or not electing a black mayor might be actually worse for the city than staying with a mayor that may not have been doing what we wanted them to do. I think the last couple of mayors we've had have been, very good people, but I think their priorities just are a little bit different than mine. And I think we were able to capitalize on the fact that we had the message and we had the momentum to really catapult us in this race, and we thought the time was right. And by the way, let me just say this, going back to your first question, it's not lost on me that in 1619, the first slaves were brought to this country, and in 1819, the city of Montgomery was founded, and now in 2019, we're getting our first black mayor. So that does have a lot of significance to me, and I certainly understand the importance of that. And when you factor that in with the other issues that I mentioned, I think those systems that were in place, the mindset that was in place, really held us back for some time because the city of Birmingham elected its first black mayor in 1979. So Alabama has seen that, big cities in Alabama have seen that, but Montgomery has just been an outlier in that case.
But an outlier no more, electing you, Stephen Reed, as the new mayor of Montgomery, Alabama, the city's first African-American mayor in its 200-year history, a storied history, mixed history, slavery, Jim Crow, obviously civil rights history as well in those many years. Thank you so much for coming on the briefing room, sharing your story. Good luck. I know you have a lot of work ahead of you, Mr. Mayor, and hope to see you back here sometime on ABC News Live.
Thank you so much. You have a great day.
And thanks to all of you for watching us on this Thursday here in the briefing room. We're here every day, 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time, also 5:30 and 6:30. Hope you download the ABC News app. If you don't have it, you can watch us live on demand, commercial-free all day long right there, plus the latest on all the stories we've talked about today. I'm Devin Dwyer in Washington. Hope to see you right back here tomorrow.